Elliot's heart thundered as he stood in the crowded Austin diner, his lie unraveling like a frayed rope. He'd told his family he was gay 3 years ago, a desperate bid to dodge their relentless matchmaking with suitable women from their tight-knit church community. Now, at 27, he faced a nightmare he hadn't foreseen. His parents had arranged for him to meet Victor Caldwell, a 45-year-old Texas oil tycoon they called his perfect match. The diner buzzed with clinking plates and laughter, but Elliot felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. He gripped his coffee mug, staring at the door where Victor would soon walk through. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. "Victor's a good man, Elliot. He'll provide stability, something you need." Stability. The word tasted bitter. His lie had been a shield, a way to carve out space to figure himself out without their suffocating expectations. He wasn't gay. He wasn't anything yet, still untangling his heart in a world that demanded labels. But the lie had grown legs, and now it was sprinting toward a cliff. The bell above the diner door jingled, and in walked Victor, all slicked back hair and a tailored suit that screamed money. He was broad-shouldered, with a face that might have been handsome once but now carried the weight of arrogance and too many late-night deals. Elliot's stomach churned. Hideous wasn't just Victor's looks. It was the idea of being chained to someone he didn't love, all to uphold a facade he'd built to survive. "Elliot Harper?" Victor's voice was smooth, like whiskey poured over gravel. He extended a hand, his smile more business than warmth. Elliot shook it, his palm clammy. "Nice to meet you," Elliot managed, his voice tight. He slid into the booth, the vinyl squeaking under him. Victor sat opposite, his eyes scanning Elliot like he was sizing up a stock portfolio. "Your parents speak highly of you," Victor said, leaning back. "Said you're a teacher. Noble work. Low pay, though." He chuckled, as if money were the only measure of worth. Elliot forced a smile. "I love my job. Kids are honest. They don't pretend to be something they're not." The jab was subtle, but Victor's raised eyebrow told Elliot it landed. The conversation limped along, Victor talking about his oil rigs, his ranch, his vision for a power couple in Texas high society. Elliot nodded, his mind racing for an escape. He'd never meant for this to happen. The lie had started small. A casual "I'm gay" at a family dinner to shut down his mother's endless parade of eligible daughters from her book club. It had worked too well. His conservative family, after initial shock, had embraced it with a fervor that felt performative, like they were proving their progressiveness. They'd even started suggesting nice young men from their network, and now here was Victor, the culmination of their misguided enthusiasm. As Victor droned on, Elliot's eyes wandered to the diner counter, where a man about his age was wiping down the surface with a rag. He was Latino, maybe 29, with dark curls falling into his eyes and a quiet intensity that drew Elliot in. The name tag read, Mateo. He moved with purpose, but his glances toward the customers held a warmth that felt real. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met, and Mateo offered a small, knowing smile, like he could see the storm brewing in Elliot's head. "Elliot," Victor's voice snapped him back. "You seem distracted." "Sorry," Elliot mumbled, heat creeping up his neck. "Just long day." Victor leaned forward, his tone shifting to something almost predatory. "Look, I know this is fast. Your parents want this to work, and I'm a man who gets what he wants. We could be good together. Think about it. A life of comfort, influence." Elliot's throat tightened. He wanted to scream that he didn't want comfort or influence. He wanted freedom, authenticity, a chance to discover who he was without his family's script. But all he said was, "I'll think about it." That night, Elliot lay awake in his small apartment, the hum of Austin's nightlife filtering through his window. He couldn't marry Victor. He couldn't keep living this lie. But coming clean now would mean admitting he'd deceived everyone for years, shattering the fragile acceptance his family had built around his supposed identity. The shame felt like a weight on his chest. The next day, he found himself back at the diner, not for Victor, but for a cup of coffee and a moment of peace. Mateo was there again, pouring coffee with that same quiet grace. When he brought Elliot's order, he lingered. "Rough day yesterday?" Mateo asked, his voice low and warm, like he genuinely cared. Elliot blinked, caught off guard. "You noticed. Hard not to. You looked like you were about to bolt." Mateo's smile was soft, but his eyes held a spark of curiosity. "Want to talk about it?" For reasons Elliot couldn't explain, he did. He spilled it all, the lie, the pressure, Victor's proposal. Mateo listened, his face unreadable but attentive. When Elliot finished, Mateo leaned against the counter, thoughtful. "That's a hell of a mess," Mateo said. "But you know what? You don't owe anyone a performance. Not your family, not that oil guy. You get to decide who you are." Elliot stared at him, the words sinking in like rain on parched earth. For the first time in years, he felt seen. Not as the son his parents wanted, or the partner Victor expected, but as himself, messy and uncertain. "I don't even know who that is yet," Elliot admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Mateo's grin was electric. "Then maybe it's time to find out." Over the next week, Elliot kept coming back to the diner. Mateo became a lifeline, their conversations a mix of banter and raw honesty. Mateo shared his own story, how he'd come out as gay at 20, how his family had struggled but eventually embraced him, how he'd built a life on his own terms in Austin. His confidence was infectious, and Elliot found himself drawn to Mateo's unapologetic authenticity. One evening, as they sat on the diner's patio after Mateo's shift, the Texas sky ablaze with stars, Elliot felt something shift. Mateo's hand brushed his as they shared a plate of fries, and the touch sent a jolt through him. Not just attraction, but a sense of possibility. "You ever think about just telling them the truth?" Mateo asked, his voice gentle but firm. "Every day," Elliot said. "But it's not just about me. It's my mom, my dad, their whole world. They've built this narrative around me being gay, and if I take that away," he trailed off, the weight of it crushing. Mateo leaned closer, his eyes steady. "You're not responsible for their world. You're responsible for yours." Elliot wanted to believe him, but as his phone buzzed with a text from his mother, "Victor's expecting you at his ranch this weekend," he knew the truth wouldn't come easy. The drive to Victor's ranch felt like a march to the gallows. Elliot's old pickup rattled along the winding roads outside Austin, the Texas countryside blurring past in a haze of green and gold. His mother's text had been clear. This weekend was a test, a chance to bond with Victor. The idea made his skin crawl, but backing out would raise questions he wasn't ready to answer. Victor's ranch was a sprawling monument to wealth. Acres of manicured land, a mansion that looked like it belonged in a magazine, and a stable of horses that probably cost more than Elliot's annual salary. Victor greeted him at the gate, his smile all teeth and calculation. "Welcome to my world, Elliot," he said, clapping him on the shoulder like they were old friends. Inside, the house was a labyrinth of polished wood and leather, every surface screaming excess. Victor led him to a study, where a bottle of bourbon waited on a mahogany desk. "Let's talk business," Victor said, pouring 2 glasses. "Your parents think we're a match." "I'm inclined to agree." Elliot's stomach twisted. "I'm not sure I'm ready for all this," he said, gesturing vaguely at the opulence around them. Victor's eyes narrowed, but his smile didn't falter. "You're young. You'll learn to appreciate it. A man like me can open doors, private schools for your future kids, connections in every major city. You'd never want for anything." Elliot sipped the bourbon, the burn doing little to calm his nerves. He didn't want Victor's world. He wanted late nights at the diner with Mateo, laughing over stupid puns and sharing stories under the stars. But that world felt like a dream, and this Victor's cold, transactional vision was reality. The weekend dragged on with forced pleasantries. A tour of the ranch, a dinner where Victor talked endlessly about his business ventures, a horseback ride where Elliot nearly fell off trying to keep up. By Sunday, he was exhausted, his mind a tangle of guilt and defiance. Victor, sensing his hesitation, cornered him in the study again. "I'm not a patient man, Elliot," Victor said, his voice low. "Your parents want this. I want this. Don't make things difficult." The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Elliot nodded, his throat tight, and left the ranch with a promise to think it over. Back in Austin, he went straight to the diner. Mateo was there, as always, his presence like a beacon in the storm. When Elliot told him about the weekend, Mateo's face darkened. "He's not just pushy, he's dangerous," Mateo said, wiping down the counter with more force than necessary. "You can't let him control you like this." "I don't know how to stop it," Elliot admitted. "If I tell my family the truth, they'll hate me. If I don't, I'm stuck with him." Mateo set the rag down and leaned across the counter, his voice fierce. "You're not stuck. You're stronger than you think. And you're not alone." The words lit something in Elliot's chest, a spark of courage he hadn't felt before. Over the next few days, he and Mateo grew closer, their connection deepening with every shared moment. Mateo took him to a local art gallery, where they laughed at pretentious sculptures and stole glances at each other. They walked along the Colorado River at dusk, the city lights reflecting on the water, and Elliot felt a pull he couldn't ignore. When Mateo's hand found his, it wasn't just comfort. It was a promise. But the pressure from his family was relentless. His mother called daily, gushing about Victor's wealth and how proud they were of Elliot for settling down. His father sent a long email about family duty, each word a brick in the wall closing around him. And Victor himself was inescapable, texting about dinner plans and our future. One night, after a particularly suffocating call from his mother, Elliot broke. He drove to Mateo's apartment, a small but cozy place filled with books and vinyl records. Mateo opened the door, concern etched on his face. "I can't do this anymore," Elliot said, his voice cracking. "I can't keep lying, but I'm terrified of what happens when I stop." Mateo pulled him inside, guiding him to the couch. "You're not alone," he repeated, his hand resting on Elliot's knee. "Whatever happens, I've got your back." For the first time, Elliot let himself cry, not out of despair, but from the relief of being truly seen. Mateo held him, his arms steady and warm, and in that moment, Elliot knew he couldn't go back to the lie. But the truth came with a cost, and he wasn't sure he was ready to pay it. The truth was a blade, and Elliot was about to wield it. He stood outside his parents' house in suburban Austin, the neatly trimmed lawn and familiar porch swing mocking him with their normalcy. Tonight, he'd tell them everything. The lie, the confusion, the dread of Victor's proposal. But as he knocked, his resolve wavered. What if they rejected him, not for being gay, but for deceiving them? His mother, Clara, opened the door, her smile bright but brittle. "Elliot, we were just talking about you and Victor. Come in, your father's making his famous chili." The warmth of the house felt suffocating. His father, James, greeted him with a nod, his eyes sharp with expectation. Over dinner, the conversation inevitably turned to Victor. Clara gushed about his generosity, how he'd donated to their church, how he'd promised to fund a community center. James chimed in, calling Victor a man of character. Elliot's spoon clattered against his bowl. "I'm not marrying him," he blurted. The room went silent. Clara's smile froze, and James set his glass down with a deliberate thud. "What do you mean?" his father asked, his voice low. Elliot's heart pounded, but Mateo's words echoed in his mind. "You're not responsible for their world." "I'm not gay," he said, the words spilling out like a dam breaking. "I never was. I said it to stop you from pushing me into relationships I didn't want. I needed space to figure myself out, but now you're forcing me into something even worse." Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "You lied to us? For years. I didn't know what else to do," Elliot said, his voice shaking. "You kept trying to control my life. I just wanted to breathe." James's face reddened. "You let us believe this. You let us rearrange our lives, our expectations. For a lie? Do you know how humiliating this is?" The argument escalated, voices rising until Clara was crying and James was pacing. They accused him of betrayal, of mocking their faith, of disrespecting their love. Elliot tried to explain how their pressure had suffocated him, how he was still searching for who he was, but their hurt drowned him out. "You need to leave," James said finally, his voice cold. "We need time." Elliot drove back to his apartment, the weight of their rejection crushing him. He'd expected anger, but not this. A door slammed shut, a family fractured. When he told Mateo, his friend's face hardened with resolve. "They'll come around," Mateo said, sitting beside him on the couch. "But even if they don't, you did the right thing. You chose yourself." Elliot wanted to believe him, but the loss felt like a wound that wouldn't close. Over the next week, he threw himself into work, teaching his fifth graders with a forced smile. Mateo was a constant presence, bringing coffee to his classroom, dragging him to open mic nights to laugh and forget. Their connection grew, a quiet intimacy blooming in stolen moments. A shared glance during a movie, a brush of shoulders on a crowded street. But Victor wasn't done. One evening, he showed up at the diner, his presence like a storm cloud. Mateo was behind the counter, and Elliot was at his usual booth, their laughter cut short by Victor's arrival. "We need to talk," Victor said, his tone clipped. He didn't sit, just loomed over the table. "Your parents told me about your revelation. Doesn't change anything. I still want you." Elliot's blood ran cold. "I don't want you," he said, his voice steady despite the fear. "I'm not interested." Victor's smile was thin. "You don't get it, do you? Your family's in deep with me. That community center, my money, your father's business loan, my connections. You walk away, they lose everything." The threat landed like a punch. Elliot glanced at Mateo, who was watching Victor with barely concealed anger. "You're blackmailing him?" Mateo snapped, stepping out from behind the counter. Victor barely spared him a glance. "Stay out of this, waiter." Mateo bristled, but Elliot put a hand on his arm. "I'll handle it," he said, then turned to Victor. "I'm not marrying you. Not for my family, not for your money, not for anything." Victor's eyes darkened. "You'll regret this." He left without another word, the bell above the door ringing like a warning. That night, Mateo walked Elliot home, the tension between them palpable. Under the glow of a street lamp, Mateo stopped, his hand finding Elliot's. "You're braver than you know," he said, his voice soft. Elliot's heart raced. "I'm scared," he admitted, "but I'm done pretending." Mateo's smile was radiant, and when he leaned in, their lips met in a kiss that felt like freedom. It wasn't just attraction, it was trust, vulnerability, a step toward something real. Victor's threat wasn't empty. Over the next week, Elliot's world began to crack. His father called, voice strained, to say the bank was reassessing his business loan. Clara stopped answering his texts. Whispers reached him through mutual friends. Victor was pulling strings, leveraging his influence to pressure Elliot's family. The community center project stalled, and the church gossiped about the Harpers' ungrateful son. Elliot felt like he was drowning. He'd chosen honesty, but at what cost? His job was the only thing keeping him grounded. The kids' laughter a reminder of why he'd fought to be himself. Mateo was his anchor, their relationship a quiet rebellion against the chaos. They spent evenings exploring Austin's hidden corners, food trucks, jazz bars, a hilltop where they watched the city sparkle below. Each moment with Mateo felt like a step toward the person Elliot wanted to be. But Victor's shadow loomed. One afternoon, Elliot found a note slipped under his apartment door. "Think carefully. You can still fix this." No signature, but the handwriting was unmistakably Victor's. Panic clawed at him. He showed the note to Mateo, who read it with a scowl. "He's trying to scare you," Mateo said, crumpling the paper. "He's a bully with money. Don't let him win." "I don't know how to fight this," Elliot said. "He's got my family in his pocket." Mateo's eyes blazed. "Then we fight dirty. He's not untouchable. Everyone's got secrets." Mateo's words sparked an idea. Elliot remembered a colleague mentioning Victor's shady business dealings. Rumors of tax evasion, backroom deals with local officials. If they could find proof, they might turn the tables. But digging into Victor's life was risky, and Elliot wasn't sure he had the stomach for it. Mateo, however, was all in. He tapped into his network, friends in Austin's activist circles, a cousin who worked in city records. They spent late nights poring over public documents, chasing leads. Elliot was amazed by Mateo's tenacity, his refusal to back down. It wasn't just about protecting Elliot. It was about justice, about standing up to someone who thought wealth made him invincible. One evening, Mateo showed up at Elliot's apartment with a flash drive. "Got something," he said, his grin triumphant. "Victor's been funneling money through shell companies to dodge taxes. My cousin found a paper trail in the city's permit records. It's not airtight, but it's enough to make him nervous." Elliot stared at the drive, his heart racing. "If we use this, he'll come after us harder." "Maybe," Mateo said. "But if he knows you've got this, he might back off. Bullies hate being exposed." They decided to confront Victor, but not alone. Mateo insisted on bringing a friend, Lila, a sharp-tongued lawyer who dealt with men like Victor before. They arranged to meet at a neutral spot, a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town. Victor arrived, his face a mask of barely concealed rage. "What's this about?" he demanded, eyeing Lila warily. Elliot slid the flash drive across the table. "We know about your shell companies. Back off or this goes to the press." Victor's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. "You're playing a dangerous game, kid. You think you can threaten me?" Lila leaned forward, her voice calm but cutting. "It's not a threat. It's a promise. You've got a lot to lose, Mr. Caldwell. Walk away." For a moment, Victor's confidence wavered. He snatched the drive and stood. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice lacked its usual bite. After he left, Elliot exhaled, his hands trembling. Mateo squeezed his shoulder. "You did it. You stood up to him." But the victory felt hollow. Elliot's parents still wouldn't speak to him, and the weight of their disappointment lingered. He and Mateo grew closer, their relationship a bright spot in the storm, but Elliot couldn't shake the fear that he'd lost his family for good. One night, as they sat on Mateo's balcony, the city humming below, Elliot voiced his deepest fear. "What if they never forgive me?" Mateo took his hand, his touch steady. "Then you build a new family, with people who love you for you." The words were a lifeline, but Elliot knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. He was learning to live authentically, but the cost was steep, and the wounds were still fresh. Victor backed off, but the fallout lingered. The bank approved his father's loan again, and the community center project resumed, but Elliot's parents remained distant. He sent texts, left voicemails, even showed up at their house. But Clara's eyes were cold, and James barely spoke. The silence was worse than their anger. It was absence, a void where their love used to be. Elliot threw himself into his life with Mateo, finding solace in their shared moments. They cooked together, Mateo teaching him how to make his abuela's tamales, the kitchen filled with laughter and the scent of spices. They volunteered at a local youth center, helping queer teens navigate their own struggles. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of himself, but the ache of his family's rejection never fully faded. One afternoon, as Elliot graded papers at the diner, Mateo slid into the booth across from him. "I've got an idea," he said, his eyes bright. "Let's throw a fundraiser for the youth center. Show your parents who you are. Not the lie, not their expectations, but you." Elliot hesitated. "They won't come. They can't even look at me." "Then we do it for you," Mateo said. "And for the kids. Maybe they'll see it, maybe they won't. But you'll know you're living your truth." The fundraiser took weeks to plan. Elliot and Mateo rallied volunteers, secured a venue at a local park, and spread the word through flyers and social media. The event was a celebration of authenticity. Music, art, stories from queer youth about finding their place in the world. Elliot poured his heart into it, hoping it might bridge the gap with his family, even if they never showed. The day of the fundraiser was electric. The park buzzed with people. Teenagers laughing, families dancing, vendors selling rainbow-themed crafts. Elliot stood on a small stage, sharing his story with a microphone that felt heavier than it should. He didn't mention the lie directly, but he spoke of his journey to self-acceptance, of learning to love without fear. The crowd listened, some nodding, others wiping tears. Mateo stood at the front, his smile a beacon of pride. As Elliot stepped off the stage, he saw them, Clara and James, standing at the edge of the crowd. His heart stopped. They looked uncertain, out of place, but they were there. He approached, his throat tight. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. Clara's eyes were red. "We saw the flyers. We wanted to understand." James cleared his throat. "We're not there yet, Elliot. What you did, it hurt. But seeing you up there, helping those kids, it's hard to argue with that. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it was a start." They talked, haltingly at first, about the fundraiser, the kids, the life Elliot was building. Clara admitted they'd been wrong to push him toward Victor, that they'd let their fears override his happiness. James was quieter, but his presence spoke volumes. The fundraiser raised enough to keep the youth center running for another year, but for Elliot, the real victory was the crack in the wall between him and his parents. They didn't stay long, but they promised to talk again, to try. That night, Elliot and Mateo stood on a hilltop overlooking the prairie, the stars bright above. Mateo's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. "You did it," Mateo said. "You showed them who you are." Elliot smiled, the weight in his chest lighter than it had been in years. "I'm still figuring that out, but I know I want you in it." Mateo's laugh was soft, his kiss softer. "Good, because I'm not going anywhere." The road to reconciliation with his family would be long, and Victor's shadow might linger, but Elliot was no longer pretending. He was living messy, uncertain, but true, and with Mateo by his side, he knew he could face whatever came next. The stars above seemed to agree, twinkling with the promise of a life built on honesty, love, and the courage to be himself.